welcome to All Steelers Talk, your home for everything Pittsburgh Steelers, presented by allsteelers.com. Hello, lovely people of Steelers Nation. Thank you for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Find us on youtube.com/allsteelerstalk. I'm your host, Noah Schrackbein, joined every Friday by my main man, Derrick Bell. Derrick, I know you're a little tired, but how you feeling, my friend?
Feeling good. Running on pure adrenaline.
That Kentucky adrenaline. For those of you who don't follow Derrick on Twitter, he was out in Kentucky's pro day at Lexington today. Has not slept yet. He'll sleep after this one because the dude's a warrior. Nothing new. The man's a maniac. We appreciate you. We really do. Let's dive right into Kentucky's pro day here. You are fresh off the road from Lexington. It was you, Brandon Hunt, and nobody else there, apparently. What are some of your takeaways you had at Kentucky's pro day?
Yeah, so I think they announced that they had scouts from all 32 teams. A couple teams I saw had multiple people there, but not nearly the turnout from like a media standpoint or even like a scouting or big time NFL personnel standpoint that Cincinnati was last week. But still a good amount of people there. Kentucky's got a lot of interesting players, man. Probably no one that's going to go in the top 40, 50 picks, but they got a lot of guys that are, draftable, I would say. Probably their best player, in my opinion, is Josh Paschal, edge rusher. I think he's got a chance to maybe sneak into the second round. The Steelers met with him informally at the Combine. He's an intriguing player, good player that can rush off the edge and from the inside and like sub packages. And then a guy who I thought had a fantastic day, he really stole the show in my opinion, was Wan'Dale Robinson, the transfer from Nebraska. Came in 5'8", 179. He did 19 reps on the bench, which is crazy for a guy that small. I mean, he's got really short arms, but I still just looking at him from a couple feet away, he's really built pretty well for a guy that small. But man, he made a couple fantastic catches, like adjustments to poorly thrown footballs down the field, one on the sideline and then one on a go route down the middle that I posted on Twitter. He had a really good day, man. I thought that it was a really impressive showing. And then they've got some other guys too that, could potentially be drafted, like Yusuf Corker, safety. He's kind of a box safety, but I think he's got a chance to get drafted on day 3. Darian Kennard, he's another guy that probably could go in the second round, in my opinion. So a lot of
he only put up 20 bench reps, right? Kennard only put up 20.
Only 20 bench reps, but I will say that didn't really surprise or concern me per se because 35-inch arms, 87th percentile for the offensive linemen, 94th percentile for guards, which is where I kind of project him at the next level. Guys that have the really long wingspan, they typically do struggle or underwhelm a little bit in the bench press because they got to get the bar higher than guys, with those 30-inch arms, and they could just crank those out. So, but yeah, it was fun.
So somebody brought this up during the week. I don't remember what day it was, talking about Wan'Dale Robinson. We weren't talking about Wan'Dale Robinson. We were talking about Sky Moore, I believe. And they made the argument that the Steelers offense is not built for speedy wide receivers. And I made the argument that I believe that they might be built for speedy wide receivers in this new offense. What's your thought on, Wan'Dale Robinson's a guy that you've highlighted for the Steelers in the past. And 5'8", he's a small, speedy guy.
Yeah. So Robinson's kind of interesting because at the next level, he's probably just going to be exclusively a slot guy, but he's going to be a little bit of that gadgety player. He reminds me a little bit of Taylor Gabriel. Who played for the Falcons and for the Browns for a little bit. He's a guy that at Nebraska carried the football. They were trying to use him almost like a running back. And then he went to Kentucky. And what he showcased this year was his ability to get down the field and work off the vertical plane and catch deep passes. Something that a lot of people didn't really think that he could do. I thought I was really impressed by that portion of his tape. For a small guy that lacks length, he was able to make some downfield catches, which was awesome. But yeah, a slot guy who's really, really quick, man. Watching this dude run routes and get in and out of his breaks, he's incredibly agile. I mean, it's really impressive. Like watching him run some of these like out routes or stuff underneath, like it was something to watch. And then, like I said, the tracking down the field was really impressive too. So I think the Steelers offense can be built for speed. They just don't have any speed on offense. I mean, that's why you look at them finishing 30th last year in explosive pass rate,
Yeah.
and you look at the guys, the athletes that they have on offense. I mean, they've got one guy who really even tested well, and that's Claypool. We know that he tested a lot better than he plays, like as far as speed goes. He's a build-up speed guy. He's not really like a big play, straight up burner. And that's what I think the Steelers need to get in this draft class. They need to get a guy who can hit a home run and provide, like, even if it's a guy like Robinson or Danny Gray in the third day of the draft, where you can literally just say, look, if this guy can give us 5 or 6 explosive plays this year on offense, like, that's fantastic. That's all we need. You're not asking to be a every down contributor. Just give us something, like some home run ability.
Is that the Steelers' best way to go in the draft? Because we could all assume they're going to draft somebody. Is that their best? Because we're about to get to your mock draft, and you've George Pickens in the second round, which is, I mean, he's a stretch the field guy, but in a totally different way. Is that their best option? Is that speedy, explosive guy?
I mean, man, if they're not going to sign a free agent receiver, I think they're going to double dip. And
I think they're going to double dip too.
And that's where you can get, kind of multiple flavors, I guess. Like you can get a guy like George Pickens who can work vertical, but he does a lot of other things really well. He can play above the rim. He's a good route runner, can beat press. And then you could get a guy like on day 3, not just Danny Gray, who we'll talk about a little bit in the mock draft section, but there's other speedsters out there that you can probably grab late, like Velus Jones from Tennessee. He's another guy who can really fly. And like even another slot guy that, could potentially provide some sparks like Bo Melton. I mean, he had a really good Senior Bowl week. So there's different ways to go about it. I mean, I think you do need one of those. If you double dip, especially, you need one of those 2 guys to be slot capable. That doesn't mean they have to live in there full time, but you need one of them to be pretty proficient in the slot, especially unless you're planning on moving Claypool inside, which they've given us no indication that they're willing to do that.
No, I don't see the Chase Claypool moving inside argument moving forward, like as we go into training camp and OTAs and all that stuff. I agree with the double dipping thing. I think that's fine. My double dip was Sky Moore and Danny Gray. I had Danny Gray going a lot earlier than you did, actually, which I hope yours is the case. And I just think that I agree with you. Like they need that guy. They have a Deontay Johnson, like a true just catch the football, always pretty much open. Chase Claypool's their big body who they're hoping turns into something. If they're trying to replicate Chase Claypool as like that third guy, I understand that one. But the third guy or the fourth guy that they need on that roster needs to be somebody who could do it all, and that includes stretching the field. I agree.
So what I really like about Sky Moore in your mock too, Sky Moore 2 years ago played a lot in the slot. He was really freaking good there. And then last year they moved him outside. And what that kind of the questions that answered was, when you're outside playing on the boundary, there's like that X receiver. Can he beat press? That's the thing about Moore that I think is, super helpful for him coming into the league, and definitely something that translate is he destroyed press coverage in college. I mean, you love to see that, especially from a small receiver. Guys are going to come up in his face and try to get their hands on him, reroute, jam him up. He just was not having any of it last year. I mean, you look at his tape and guys just really struggle to get at him on the line of scrimmage. And that's definitely something that translates. And, you can see him being effective, not just as a slot guy, but also outside. And it provides extra, versatility for your offense.
Yeah, I do. I think he's a guy, he's like Christian Watson, where the hype's going to be here right now. And by the time the draft rolls around in the end of the month, that hype will have died down enough where Sky Moore is the option there in the second round. Whereas the other way around, I think George Pickens is working his way up to the first round. Anyways, that's a good transition here. On Monday, we both released our mock draft 2.0, and we started with the same guy, Desmond Ridder, good old Desmond Ridder. We won't get too deep into that, but let everybody know why Desmond Ridder was the pick at 20.
Yeah, I mean, I was at the Cincinnati Pro Day, so they had a lot of eyes on him, which was expected. I mean, they've been looking at a lot of these quarterbacks, but Really, Ritter for me is just that I think there is some smoke around this Malik Willis to the Detroit Lions at 2, or maybe in a trade back scenario. That could happen. And then, Carolina really seems like they're going to take a quarterback. And it seems like it's probably going to be Kenny Pickett. Really, it's difficult to figure out who would be the next guy on the Steelers board. We know they want a quarterback. They've made it really obvious. And then Ritter, for me, it really comes down to two factors. Like, I think that he's the smartest quarterback in the class, and I also think that he's arguably the most aggressive. And I think that those are two traits that you really look for as far as, like, if you're going to take a guy in round one. Those are good traits to have. And I think that, you look at a guy who won 44 games in 4 years. He's been a 4-year starter, took that program to kind of new heights. He's got a lot of stuff to work on, from like just being more consistent, like mechanically with his lower body, and that it really affects his accuracy. But there's a lot of stuff to like from like a mental perspective. And I think that's going to be intriguing for them.
Yeah. I think that at the end of the first round and the quarterbacks you're going to get, my thought with it was you're looking for a guy who just brings enough energy that, worst case scenario, you toss him in, he'll spark a team. And that's who Desmond Ridder is. Worst case scenario, if all the other quarterbacks in Pittsburgh don't work out this season, you could toss Desmond Ridder in there and expect him to win a couple of games just off of pure will.
So
that's who they're going to get.
So Ridder at the combine, I was at his podium, and he compared himself. I believe it was, I'm going to get the other player wrong. It's either Deshaun Watson or Matt Ryan. I can't remember which one it is. I'm so sorry. But I know that the player that he's compared himself to a lot in these interviews has been Ryan Tannehill. And I really think that there's some stuff there, because I think he's a better athlete than Tannehill. But you got to remember, Tannehill was a receiver in college too. So, like, really good athlete in his own right. But they do a lot of the same things well. Like, one of the things that Tannehill does really well, especially for Tennessee, and why he's a good fit there, is like those play action, like dig routes or posts and stuff over the middle. He throws those really well with anticipation and velocity, those with good pace. And that's something Ridder does extremely well. Ridder has some of the prettiest backside dig throws of the class. He's really the only quarterback that even tries them. I wish they ran even more of them, honestly. But I think there's some similarities there. So that could be like a comp if you're really looking for one with Desmond Ridder.
What do you, just real quick, there's a lot of people that argue the whole you shouldn't compare players to players thing. What's your thought on that?
I always tell people, don't force comps. That's why I usually don't do them. And honestly, like, I really will only do them if I feel really confident. And I'll sometimes surprise people with a random comp. Like, a couple years ago, I compared Jerry Jeudy to Chad Johnson. That was one that got a lot of run on the Twitter sphere.
Yeah.
But I usually try to stay away a little bit. But if you're gonna make comps, it needs to be stylistic comps. You need to look at a player's like profile and how they play. And that's not to say, like, one thing with the Ridder Tannehill thing that like a lot of people have been throwing out, and I do see some of it. That doesn't mean Ridder can't be better than Tannehill, or I don't know if people look at that as a good or a bad thing, or how people view Ryan Tannehill. That's just like a stylistic thing where, like, I think Ridder can work well in like play action and throw over the middle, kind of doing a lot of the same things that Tannehill does pretty well.
Yeah, because I was going to say Ryan Tannehill is a terrible name to compare somebody to, which is a good way to bring this argument up, because that's a bad comp. But if you understand that a comp is not this player is exactly going to be this player, it works out pretty well. All right, so we're going to skip Nick Cross because we're going to talk about safety options here in a minute. But last 4 picks that you have for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Max Mitchell, out of Louisiana. I know that they met with him at least at the Senior Bowl. He talked a lot about playing with Kevin Dotson, which would be cool. Danny Gray, we both agreed on Danny Gray. You just talked about him a little bit. Speedster out of SMU, who never really got an opportunity to showcase everything that he's got. You also have a great article on him at allsteelers.com. Jacoby Durant, can't say that I know much about him. And Zacoby McClant. That's crazy that your last 2 picks pretty much have the same name, and they're both crazy different. All right, out of these last 4 picks, who stands out for you? What one do you think could make a pretty good impact for the Steelers early on in their career?
Oh, man. I don't know. I like all of them, or else I wouldn't have put him in the mock. I'm just kidding. I mean, I like them in different phases. I mean, on day 3, you're just looking at dartboard
Yeah.
throws, and developmental picks, and I think that's kind of what all these guys kind of bring a little bit. Mitchell, I think, has starter potential at left or right tackle. I mean, he's played both in college. A couple years ago, you talked about Kevin Dodson. When Mitchell and Dodson were on that line, that Louisiana offense averaged over 6 yards a carry. I mean, they throttled teams on the ground. I mean, it was like 3rd in the nation or something like that for rushing yards. Danny Gray, I talked about getting that big play ability. Gray, anytime he touches the football, he's a threat to take it to the house. And I think that's something that the Steelers really need. Jacoby Durant, man, so I watched the game that I watched that kind of turned me on to him was the Clemson game from last year. It wasn't perfect. He did have some matchups with Justin Ross. Ross won a couple of those, but really opportunistic. Got 2 interceptions. One was a beautiful play down the sideline. The other was off a tip ball. He broke up 2 passes in addition to that. Anytime small school guys get in those big games against big time programs, against better competition, and hold their own, and they look like they belong, that's usually a good sign on if they're able to translate to the next level. And then McClain, that dude loves to hit, and I think he's going to be a really good special teams player. And I think, like, in round 7, man, if you're going to get a linebacker, they are obviously going to play special teams. And I think he offers some upside maybe down the line as like a 1st and 2nd down linebacker that can help you play the run.
All right. I'm big. I think Max Mitchell is a developmental piece, but he's a dude who immediately upon meeting him said, yeah, I just pretty much live in the weight room. And I was like, well, that's a great start for a small school offensive lineman. Danny Gray, I agree with you. I read your article on him and totally persuaded me. That's happened quite a bit in this draft season. Jacoby Durant, and I love a guy that hits, so feel good about it. All right, let's talk about Nick Cross. You tweeted out something a couple of days ago that caught my attention. You said that it's almost time to admit that the Pittsburgh Steelers' long-term plan for strong safety is in the NFL draft. Do you believe that's Nick Cross? Why do you feel that it's now this path or maybe nothing?
I don't think that there's very many options on the free agent market that are really going to be able to fill that spot long term. Like, even a guy like the safety from Atlanta, Kaze.
Oh, Kazi.
Yeah, like even he's not probably going to be a long-term option. I mean, Honey Badger, I think that just seems like a scenario that's really unlikely to me, just given his age. Not that you wouldn't want to have him because he's still a baller. And then Edmonds, man, like, honestly, I don't know what his market is, but it doesn't seem like they have any interest in really bringing him back. Maybe that changes. I don't know. But even if they do at this point, I mean, it's hard to see them bringing him back for more than a year or 2. So that's not really a long-term answer either. And then I look at this draft class, like, and just evaluating it since the summer, and man, I think this safety class is really good. I mean, it's not as deep as corner is, in my opinion, but there's a lot of dudes in this class, man, that can play a lot of different roles. It's really just a matter of, it's a flavor thing. What do you want in your strong safety? Do you want a guy that can come down and play in the nickel? Do you want a guy that can play in the box? Do you want a guy that can rotate and play center field? It really just depends. But there's a lot of different guys out there that are super talented that I think can make an impact early. And Cross is one of those guys. And I mentioned Nick Cross just because if you look at his testing numbers, really good tester, really good athlete. He plays at Maryland. We know how much Tomlin loves that program. And he's also Tomlin's son's roommate. So that's another thing. So they're obviously really familiar with him. They had a formal meeting with him at the combine. It makes sense to me. I think it makes sense.
All right. So before we dive into Cross and other options, everything that you just said about the Terrell Edmonds situation, and that there's a very deep class in safety, a good class in safety. Do you think that the good class in safety is why the Steelers don't have any interest in Terrell Edmonds? Or do you think that there's maybe another reason why Terrell Edmonds doesn't have interest in the Steelers?
So I think that sometimes when you have first round picks, and here's my thoughts on Edmonds. I think he's a solid player.
Yeah.
He doesn't do anything really extraordinary. He has no like outstanding traits. He's a good tackler. He's pretty versatile. He's athletic. He's not going to be in a ton of mismatches from a physical standpoint. Um, but he's just kind of tapped out, in my opinion. I don't know how much better Edmonds can really get. I don't see his ball skills just randomly taking a 180 and him becoming this super playmaker. And when you got a guy that's coming off a rookie deal, they didn't pick up his fifth-year option, so they already kind of told us a little bit how they feel about him in general last year. And then, they don't make him a priority in the first couple weeks in free agents. I mean, I think that tells you what they think. And I think if I had to guess, I think it's less about probably the draft class and more about you're going to have to pay a player more than you've been paying him, and he's probably close to being, even at 25, probably close to being tapped out as far as being the player that he pretty much is and will be for the rest of his career.
Yeah, but do you still not do you not think that bringing him back on a 1-2 year deal is good? Oh wait, or do you think that the Steelers? Because my thought is this, and I said this yesterday. I wrote an article about it today. My thought is this: they signed Carl Joseph, and maybe I'm crazy here, but I'm just speaking about how I understand the Steelers. They signed Carl Joseph. They have Trey Norwood, and I think that they liked what they saw to Trey Norwood enough last season. I also think that they believe that Carl Joseph is, still a pretty okay safety in the NFL. And I think that has given them enough comfortability to say, we're cool on anything else besides a rookie. And it could be a mid to late round rookie because we have two guys that we feel okay about. That's my thought on it.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion on that is maybe they do feel like that, but I think if that's the scenario that plays out, a rookie is going to take that job really soon.
Oh, yeah, me too. And I think that the rookie does take that job.
Which is not like the end of the world type scenario.
No.
And here's the deal that I struggle sometimes when talking with like Steelers fans on social media. You have to remember that, like, even though I think that Terrell Evans is a solid player, and he's not somebody that I look at saying he's got to get off the field, I need a better player. You have to understand, though, this defense was bad last year. You can't bring everybody back and expect for it to get better just because you're possibly maybe going to get something out of Stephon Tuitt, who really knows. You're trying to get better. You're not trying to the goal is not to bring all of your free agents back. This was a 9-7-1 team last year that had like a negative 100-point differential or something like that. I mean, like it was a very fortunate team just to squeak into the playoffs. You're trying to improve. So if they look at that position and say, this is a position where we can save a little money in the short term and we can improve it through the draft, then this might be the decision they make. And I do think like there's enough options on day 2 of the draft, assuming that they keep both of those picks, that you can get a guy that can play as a rookie. But Steelers fans going to have to remember what Edmonds looked at it like as a rookie. He's going to be a rookie, so he's going to make mistakes. They're going to miss tackles. They're going to be missed assignments. You got to understand that. So, I don't necessarily hate it. I am a little bit surprised because I really did think that they would look at it like a cheap way just to retain him and, use the draft pick somewhere else. But we'll see.
Which we'll dive into some names right now, but I agree with you. I just think the Steelers, I think the Steelers value Trey Norwood more than we believe right now, which they've done in the past. They did it with Robert Spillane last year. They feel real comfortable with him. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think Trey Norwood could be a guy that surprises a lot of people in year 2, but that's a big if, ginormous if. All right, so list of safeties is pretty large, and you know this better than I do, but there are going to be names that come off the draft in day 1, excuse me. Let's just eliminate those now. What names do you believe go in the first round of the NFL draft that the Steelers will not be taking part in?
Kyle Hamilton's the obvious one. I mean,
are you kidding? Kyle Hamilton sliding. I don't know if you've been on Twitter in the last 24 hours, but Kyle Hamilton is sliding to 20. Okay. All right, Kyle Hamilton.
I could go on we could end the show with a 30-minute rant from me on Kyle Hamilton and this stupid process involving him. But I think Daxton Hill, if you consider him a safety, I know I've talked on here that I think some teams might view him as a corner because he played so well in the slot last year as a corner. He's got that boundary corner type of length, I think over 32-inch arms. I could see teams viewing him as a corner. I think he's going to go round 1. And then a guy that I've said for the last couple months as a guy that's not appearing in many first-round mocks, but like could get in there, and now he's appearing in some. But I think Lewis Seen from Georgia has a good shot to go like really late in the first round and sneak in there. So those are the 3 guys that I think Seen at, like I talked about with Cross. I mean, the Steelers love athleticism at safety. They really value like really athletic safeties who test extremely well. And Seen is a freak. He's like a build-a safety. The dude is unreal.
So I didn't know what he looked like without a helmet until I looked him up, and he looks like just like a freak of nature on the field. You know, like you look at some people and you're just like, yeah, dude, you are just a monster athlete. Jordan Davis, prime example. Yeah. Seen is definitely one of them.
I can't remember if I put this in an article that I wrote or if I just put this on Twitter, but like I was trying to describe like Seen's play style and how just physical and violent. Like violent gets thrown out about a lot of players this time of year, but like he's a violent player. And like I was trying to describe it, and I was like, basically it's like watching, like when you watch his film, it's like watching a car crash in real time, because he will literally come from almost out of the screen and meet a running back head on, one-on-one, and just absolutely murder this guy. I mean, he's just an unbelievable. He has so much hit power and just athleticism that I mean the potential for him is, I mean, sky high. I mean, it's impossible on a Georgia defense with that many NFL players. When you're standing out like that on some of these plays where I'm not even watching him and I'm like, oh, like what was that? Like I got to rewind that. Like that's how impressive some of these reps and some of these flashes are from Seen. So that's why I think like someone's going to take a chance in round 1 and need a safety. And I just think he fits that athletic profile.
All righty. So second round, there's going to be a couple of names. I'm going to run through. Well, I think there's only 2 that I have that I would believe go on in the second round, and that's Jaquan Brisker and Nick Cross is probably third rounder. So Jalen Petrie, I would guess.
Yeah, as well. Yeah, so it's really interesting. So Grady Brown was at the Penn State Pro Day, which
yes, I know that.
In my opinion, like when you're looking at clues on who the team likes and where their interest kind of lies, formal invites or formal interviews for the combine are good.
Yep.
Position coaches at pro days are very good, in my opinion. And then top 30 visits are also very good. So those last 2 like matter a lot. So Grady Brown being there, and, you know, they have Castro Fields, so they could be looking at him too. He's a corner. But I really think that Jaquan Brisker makes a lot of sense. Cool thing about Brisker, just as like a side note, the dude was so strong. He put up 22 reps on the bench, by the way, at the combine.
Yeah, he looks like it.
The dude is so strong that, of course, Penn State, they have a lot of freaks, and that weight room program is unbelievable, and they always have these freakish testers. But dude was so strong that he literally lifted every day with the linemen, because he couldn't lift with the DB. He could not lift with him. So like he's just an unreal type of athlete. I mean, he's really explosive. I think that there was some tackling issues last year. He was dealing with a shoulder injury that probably affected that, but graded super well in coverage. I thought he was super solid there. He can play in the box. He can cover. He can play split safety. He definitely has the body type to play against like big slots and tight ends. And that's something that I really value in like today's NFL. Because if you're going to ask your strong safety to match up with some of these like Travis Kelce's or Kyle Pitts and stuff, you want that type of body type where they're going to be strong enough to where they're not going to get moved off their spot the way that tight ends can do that to like slot corners and stuff like that. So I like Brisker a lot. And then who was the other guy you mentioned? Jalen Petrie. Oh, Jalen Petrie been one of my guys for a long time, man. I got put onto his tape, I think, back in like October, November. That dude is a baller. I don't know. Some people say he's a tweener, like they don't know if he's a corner, slot, safety, nickel, strong safety, linebacker, dimebacker. Just put him on the football field and get him moving forward. Like, the dude is an absolute crazy run defender. I was talking to one of my buddies about him, and like, he gives you the ability, like when he's in the game, like you could play nickel against like 12 personnel, 2 tight ends. Ain't no tight end blocking that dude. I promise.
Yeah.
He like, you talk about like the things that Mike Hilton could do as far as like playing the run. Petrie does that. Like, he really does that, and he can cover. Like, he actually has really good footwork. So he does make sense for the Steelers too. I don't know where you play him. Like, I don't know where he's going to find a home. I think it'll depend on system, but he's a baller though.
He's a baller. Do you think either of those? And then the third name that I was thinking that might go in the second round is Kirby Joseph out of Illinois. Do you think either of those or Joseph is there
Yeah.
at 52? 52 is late.
Yeah. I don't feel great about Brisker or Petrie, but like, again, you've got to look. I would venture to say, even though I do like this safety class, especially up top in the first like 3-4 rounds, I would venture to say that 5 safeties going before 52 would be kind of wild.
I was going to say that's a lot.
It's a lot of safeties. So like,
yeah,
I would say based on that, probably one of them are. Joseph's an interesting player. I've only watched the Penn State game because that was the only film I had, but I know I just got access to another one, so I'll try to check that out. But really unique mover, because I'm pretty sure that he has something crazy like 35-inch arms or maybe 37. I don't know, like crazy arm, like wingspan. But he's a guy that they play deep a lot, and he can cover a lot of ground. I mean, he's not like I don't think he's a super great athlete. I think he's pretty instinctive though, and he can really move. And like, obviously that wingspan is going to help you get into a lot of passing lanes. So
I was going to say, you don't need to be a crazy freak athlete if you've 37-inch arms.
I got to look that up real quick.
Instinctual is all you need with arms. That's a crazy wingspan.
Okay, so he's 6 foot tall. He has a 6'8". He has a 6'8" wingspan. Pretty good.
That's crazy.
Yeah, pretty good.
That's crazy.
I'm going to be willing to guess that's probably in the 99th percentile for safety.
Yeah, that's wild. That's a dude that he has caught my attention. But just like you, I haven't really watched a whole ton of tape on him. But I know that he is sneaking his way up there into the second round. Like, his name's always kind of mentioned with the group that we've talked about, and it's kind of always overlooked a little bit. So I'm just going to ask, who's your options? You have Nick Cross. Who could the Pittsburgh Steelers actually find in the draft? That's realistic for them to find in the draft, because Kyle Hamilton slides to 20 and we just count our blessings.
So one thing that I kind of am just theorizing, and it's just a hypothetical, but I think the Steelers could be wanting to get more multiple and more diverse defensively with Terrell Austin. Okay. Tomlin said he's not going to be calling the plays, but he's going to have his chance to put his mark on the defense. Like, Austin comes from a lot of like cover 2 stuff, and they may want their safeties to be a little more interchangeable, whereas like Edmonds and Minka kind of like complemented each other well because they had different strengths and weaknesses. That really, to me, when I think about that, leads me back to Nick Cross. And the reason is because Cross has played in the box, and he's played, like last year, he played a ton like deep safety, like in the middle of the field. So, and he's a guy that like at Maryland, like in the games that I watched, they played some quarters too. Like, I don't see the Steelers going to quarters because they don't have the corners for it. But like, if they did, like, I could see Cross can do that. Like, he can play in a lot of different like zone systems, in my opinion, and give you some versatility in the back end. So that's the guy, in my opinion, that I keep coming back to as like, I think he's going to be a Steeler. But
I like the connection. I mean, Tomlin, we know the connection with Maryland. We know that Cross has a ton of upside. And I think he just meets that level, like that level that we talked about, where you have to feel comfortable, like, hey, a rookie could start year 1 without being like, okay, this guy is another Dan Moore playing next to Minka Fitzpatrick, and Minka's pretty upset about it. Go ahead.
I mean, you just don't see – like, I don't think that Cross has like he wouldn't be like the 52nd ranked player in the class for me, but the draft is about projection and what you can turn this player into. And like you look at a safety like that literally runs 4.34. It's pretty special. I mean, if you think that you can coach him up, he's got to get better at like taking better angles to the football. But there's enough flashes on tape for me to be like, yeah, I could definitely see somebody gambling in the second round. And if they don't want to get more versatile and they want like just a box safety that they can put at strong safety, they can get Brian Cook from Cincinnati. He's a guy that can play cover 2. He can play split safety looks, can really play in the box. I think he's arguably the best tackler of any secondary player in the class. Like if the dude gets his hands on you, you're going to the ground. And he loves to hit. So I know Tomlin had dinner with him in Cincinnati. I got to talk to him a little bit after his pro day about that dinner. So he's an interesting player. I think but he's probably like round 3, round 4, in my opinion. And I think they'll solve that position before then.
Yeah. And my thought with that is a guy that has upside, but needs maybe a little bit of work is you now have Terrell Austin and Mike Tomlin run. Like you could put the whole front of the defense on Brian Flores and feel 100% okay with that, and then you could focus on your defensive backs, and that's who those guys are. I mean, Mike Tomlin and Terrell Austin that's the best 1-2 punch when it comes to defensive backs in the NFL. So you could take a chance on that. There was a guy that's standing out, I think, is floating real under the radar right now after like kind of killing it in the East-West Shrine Bowl. Vernon McKinley out of Oregon left after a sophomore season, a redshirt sophomore season, obviously, but he's young, and I still think he's flying real low. Is that a guy that with potential? Is that a guy that I don't know about enough and he's nothing special? Yeah. I don't know.
No, I love McKinley's tape, like really good playmaking skills. I actually talked to him at the combine a little bit after his media session. And I was asking him about his film work, like through the week, like what his schedule was like. Because when I watch him on film, dude's always in the right spot. It's like he's literally got the play written down on his wristband. And he was going through this stuff. And I mean, he was literally telling me basically by like Wednesday of game week, he's already watched like 4 or 5 games and he knows like red zone, like what they like to work on third down, like what they like to work in certain splits on the outside. Like dude is incredibly smart. So yeah, I mean, but the only thing with him is like, he's a fine athlete, like a solid athlete, but he's not a freak and he's small. Yeah. So, like, that's a turnoff for some teams because some teams will have thresholds that they expect their safeties to meet as far as, like, athleticism or, like, testing numbers or just, like, height, weight. And, like, he's going to be a smaller, like, strong safety, free safety. I think he's probably going to have to play free safety in the league. Yeah. I would like to see what he could potentially do, like, maybe in a training camp setting as a nickel and a zone scheme. Like, I think that he's smart enough to do that. And it would potentially limit some of the other issues with his size. But just because of he can read quarterbacks, he's really smart about, understanding what offenses are trying to do to him. So I like his game. I do think he's going to go day 3, unfortunately. His pro day was today. I didn't get a chance to see how he did, though. But
yeah, I did not see either. But I know that he's ranked like roughly 100 right now.
Yeah.
On most people's big board. All right, so we'll end it with this one. This one's been sitting here for a minute. Black and yellow, Texas Steel. Appreciate you. Safety, he wants us to do it within the first 20. No. In this draft. Give me your safeties who could start day 1 for the Pittsburgh Steelers. You don't have to deep dive into any of them. Just give me your list.
I mean, really, any of those day 1, day 2 guys can start. You're just going to have to expect, like we said, about there's going to be growing pains. I mean, anytime you got a rookie starting on defense, even first rounders will struggle at times, man. They're going to make mistakes. But, I think, obviously, Hamilton, he can definitely start. I've said Daxton Hill's like Weapon X, man. You can ask whatever you need him to do on defense, he can do it, and he's going to be a baller. Seen can play. Day 1, in my opinion, needs a little work in coverage. If you ask him to do too much, like as far as like man-to-man or playing guys out the slot, I'm not sure that that's going to be like his strength early on. Cross will be a boom or bust type guy. Like I said, the bad angles really worry me a little bit. But he can play day 1 just from an athleticism standpoint. He's going to be able to hold his own. Brisker, another guy, I think he could play day one. Petrie, day one, I just don't know where he's going to play. Like I said, I think it'll depend on defense. But all those guys, in my opinion, could play day one. Brian Cook, if he wanted to play in the box, play split safety look, cover two, like he can do that too. So, I mean, like I said, I'm really high on this safety class. I don't know how many. I'm a big Daxton Hill guy. I think he's going to be a stud. But I think there's going to be multiple like guys that can make Pro Bowls in this class. I'm a big believer, and I hope the Steelers do end up with a safety in like round 2. That'd be awesome.
I do think that the Steelers are moving safety well up their draft board. I don't know about 2, but I don't think it was on there at all coming into the draft process. And I think right now it's maybe position 3 that they got. I just know Tomlin, and wide receiver is going to be second round pick. Like that's just it just is what it is.
We kind of I kind of started to think that it was a pretty high priority after we went to the combine because we started interviewing safeties and everybody. We were like, all right, have you talked to the Steelers? Like, yeah, formal. Like they did they had formal interviews with Daxton, Nick Cross, Brian Cook, Lewis Seen, and they had an informal with Brisker, but they weren't going to waste. You only get a certain amount of formals, and they weren't going to waste a formal on Brisker when he's right in our backyard. And like, they sent Grady Brown to see him at the pro day. So, I mean, Cut Boy 412. Y'all had to rewind a little bit on the clip because we just talked about that. But yes, I would take Cross in the 3rd. And as far as your love Daxton Hill comment, I'm on board with you, brother. I'm on board. I've been banging that table for a long time, man. Another thing that's interesting about I know like the Hamilton discourse has been absolutely terrible, but it has it has provided some cool articles, in my opinion, about safety value and versatility. And I want to give credit to who this was. I want to say might have been Ben Solak that put this article out, but I totally agree with one of the points he made about the NFL is asking safeties to do more now in today's NFL than they ever have. And with the amount of split safety looks, it used to be like you could just get this rangy guy and throw him in the middle of the field and get this hard hitter and you put him in the box. Like now, like I said, teams want to play that split safety look and they want to be able to switch things up, play quarters and man match and all this different stuff. So like safeties are more valuable. And like you look at a guy like Daxton, to me, that's like the prototype of what I want in terms of like more teams are playing their strong safety in the nickel, whereas used to 5-6 years ago, it was like, all right, you're going to put your smallest corner who you don't really want on the boundary, you're just going to throw him inside. And that's just what we did with everybody. Like we never thought twice about it. And then now like teams are like, we can put a safety there. And there's benefits to that because if, you're running against a team that's running 11 personnel, you put a safety in the slot instead of a corner that may not tackle as well, then that team runs the ball, then you're at an advantage. So there's good things to come with that. And I just, like I said, I'm a huge Daxton Hill fan. I love
that. Daxton Hill is the dude. I think he would mesh beautifully with Trey Norwood. I'm going to keep referring back to Trey Norwood throughout the next couple of weeks because I think he is a factor in the Steelers draft plans. Because I think that he is able to do it. He might
be a starter.
That's what I'm saying. Like he could be, and they like him enough. Whereas like he was a 7th round rookie last year. I look at him like he shouldn't have been good, and he was good enough to see the field. So the places that he struggled, I just expect him to get better in those areas. One of those was the nickel. I don't know, man. I think Trey Norwood could surprise a lot of people this year with the right help with a draft pick. But, that being said, I think in this episode, we might have put the Tyrann Mathieu rumors to bed. Although I texted you earlier and said that I literally sprinted to my office, spilled coffee all over my kitchen table because I got caught with an Adam Schefter April Fool's joke. Wasn't good.
I want to I'm about to hold on. Before we go, I want to highlight this. Yes, I think this is a really broad statement, so I don't know what this is about. But I wanted to highlight one player that I particularly like in the late rounds, Marquise Bell. That's a guy that if y'all haven't watched him, try to hit him on YouTube because there's not a ton of tape available on him, but he forced 5 fumbles last year, and then I think had like 4 or 5 interceptions the year before. This dude is massive. I mean, just a huge corner, and like somebody that I think you want to talk about a guy that like could come out of nowhere on day 3 and end up being this like really freaking good player a couple years down the road, that's the dude. He plays at Florida A&M. But yeah, he's a big dude. You know, he does a little bit of everything for them. He's played a little deep safety, plays in the slot. He can play in the box. He's like 6'2", 6'3". I mean, he's great size. So yeah, he's definitely a dude that I would keep in mind if you're looking at like late round gems.
My late round pick is Smoke Monday, and it will remain Smoke
Best name
Monday
in
out of
draft.
Auburn. Best name of all time. Of all time. And he should get drafted just because of his name and the fact that he's literally 6'2" and ginormous. All right. Thank you, everybody, for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Be a friend, tell a friend to go use our promo code at manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping. Enjoy your weekend. We'll be back next week.